Thanks so much to all of you for coming today. And it's my very great pleasure to introduce Sumathy. So excited that you made it. And so she and Yalini Dream, who performed here 2 weeks ago, are here in residence for the whole month of February, which is a wonderful boon to us. And many people contributed to co-sponsoring. So the Center for World Performance Studies is the main co-sponsor of this event. Of course, the Center for South Asian Studies, the MFA program, the Department of English, as well as a number of others, including the Performance Studies Group and also Asia Pacific Islanders. So the many hands of the university working together to bring her here, which I really appreciate. So Sumathy Sivamohan is the chair of the English department at the University of Peradeniya in Sri Lanka. Her research includes issues on gender and nationalism and the ethnic conflict. She also teaches film semiotics and reception at the university and in various diploma programs. She works with training local groups in training non-actors, mostly women and working people. Sumathy has written and directed numerous plays, both nationally and internationally, and has written a number of scripts for activist projects. She also co-scripted a documentary on the ethnic conflict called In Search of a Road, which premiered at the Singapore International Film Festival. She's made 2 short experimental films, and her first short film, Upheaval, was pre-selected at the annual Film Without Frontiers of Barcelona in 2005, and she won the Gratian Prize for English Literature in Sri Lanka for her book of plays, Thin Veils, in 2001. So a playwright, a poet, and a filmmaker who is going to speak to us today and deliver a lecture entitled The Practice of Translation, Academic Exercises, and Activist Stances. Thank you so much, and Sumathy.
Thank you. When I was invited to speak by the South Asian Studies Center, and Suge Faranam, I wondered about doing something very specifically on a topic on Sri Lanka, and then was wondering what would be useful to a South Asian or an audience interested in South Asia that did not get like too country specific, location specific. And then I decided, because this is something that I had been quite involved with, grappling with, like many of you as researchers and activists are, about the politics of research and the idea of and concerns of method. So I thought I would talk about methods of research, rather than about anything very, very specific in terms of people. But it is going to be specific. But I hope I can bring those specific instances alive to you through exploring method. For me, like for many other people, research is about politics. It's about the politics of change. So and research here, unlike a lot of the work that I do normally, but also like what most of my colleagues in the University of Peradeniya, the English department, do, like read other people's works and talk about people in books, which Gayatri Spivak says, gossip about imaginary people. Research for me is about talking to real people, and also about myself. Now, this is the very difficult part of research, because how do you talk about people and talk to people and talk to your own self without fetishizing, without the whole paper becoming something about an exposition about yourself? This is a problem that one faces in anthropology, for instance, how do you, about self-reflexivity, how self-reflexivity does not turn in on itself, or it just does not become a way of entering people's body of work, or a culture, or a society, a community, a location, but stops there, without examining the politics of that encounter. So these are the questions that I have been. So how do we concretize, how do we conceptualize research where one looks at people, talks to people, understands the situation, so that you think there would be change, there would be material change? And I, for one, do not think that research by itself, poetry or theatre by itself, bring about change. But nevertheless, it is a journey, it is a dialogue, and I, as researcher, an activist, an academic, how do I undergo a transformation that questions my own privilege as the voice that mediates and transmutes, that allows spaces for other voices to speak out or appear. Because even if that's my task, because I work a lot with marginalized groups, women and working class, working people who are generally not heard. And then how do you then find a way of not translating those voices in terms that you know how to, or making that the translation process flat and in a sense as something nice, easy to assimilate, easy to access? And this is the problem that I've had in my own work, in finding out how research can be not about myself or about the state or about a donor agency, but about the people themselves. So again, then the vision for me is it a shared journey, but we have different aims, goals, destinations? And that seemed okay, but I still, I am not quite satisfied. Is it a journey then where I change my destination? I change my goals. Is the journey where if I first wanted to publish a paper, I decide, no, I'll do a film. Or other people take my work and do their own film. I don't know. Where I become an actor. I don't know. Is it a shared journey where all of us become implicated in its own problems both the researched and the researcher. And the researcher also becomes researched by the researched. So they can build a politics of possibility, of change around the researcher. So these are questions, these are theoretical questions. How does one fill them out in actuality? I'll just throw up here, I'll just talk about a few instances, maybe it's two, where one was, I don't know how important it is. It is important for me. I was doing a critical, this was just some, what can I say? Just a one-off encounter. I was doing a critical thinking workshop with school students. And so we were there for about 3 days together. And then I wanted them to enjoy what I enjoy as well. So I had I want to know, find out, but also share with them something that I still haven't kind of got my head around as to what it means. That is William Blake's poem, Infant Sorrow. I don't know how many people know or you know it like just like that. Maybe not. You may have read it sometime or sometime or other, but so I'll just read it so that we can go back to it. Infant sorrow. My mother groaned, my father wept. Into the dangerous world I leapt. Helpless, naked, piping loud, like a fiend hid in a cloud. Struggling in my father's hands, striving against my swaddling bands, bound and weary, I thought best to sulk upon my mother's breast. So I translated this into Tamil, and we read it in English, read it in Tamil, and then I asked for, what do you think of this poem? What do you think is the meaning? Did you like it? And then one student got up and said, and I must admit that it was just that student, said, this is about the motherland. And for me, I did a double take. This is like in my wildest dreams. I had not thought of the infant sorrow as something about the motherland. And I was about to say, really? Is that so? And all that. And I checked myself. And then said, well, I had not thought of it like that, but why? And then she came up with all the imagery that would support her reading of it as motherland. And for me, I teach Blake sometimes, and every time I taught Blake after that, I could not get rid of the interpretation of motherland. And then I thought to myself, and I tell my students, but I told them too, that you have transformed me. I cannot go back and now teach in my classroom at Peradeniya without thinking about the motherland. But what I thought was, how does this help me to query, in fact, the kind of one thing, the transcendental readings that we undertake in reading literature. There's like, this is the meaning of William Blake's Infant Sorrow. But also, how deep the idea of motherland you know, I mean, how much it informs a Tamil-speaking person's view of poetry, not necessarily of life, but poetry has to be about the motherland, because most of the students, most of us growing up in the 80s, 90s, and later, these were like young children, grew up in a culture of motherland poems. So is there, for me, to in fact engage in any kind of research with these students, or with the young people, or in questions of politics, taking up questions of politics? How do I need to understand too the untranslatability or the translatability of Blake as a motherland poem, Infant Sorrow as a motherland poem, and in a way, I'm calling it untranslatability, but the untranslatability, although I don't believe in it, the untranslatability of the vexed, the complex relation that the children of Eastern Sri Lanka have toward poetry, literature, imagery, but the idea of land, the idea of universals, and I might be comfortable looking for universals in Blake's poetry. Because as an academic, I have the power, the privilege to transcend cultures, seemingly. But within the translational processes that go on within people's lives, I don't know whether the universals that we are used to in academic research, like values, norms that are not culture specific, whether they have any use, or whether they are problematic for us to impose them on the people. I'm going to give you another example. In 2000-2001, I worked for the National Integration Program Unit under the Ministry of Justice, whatever. I worked in a program for reconciliation and all that. And we were working on not on a variety of issues related to the ethnic conflict. And I was part of a team that was conducting awareness-raising programs. So I personally conducted a variety of workshops that aimed at bringing Muslim, Tamil, and Sinhala people into dialogue. As a part of this, I also worked with the tea plantation community in Sri Lanka. The tea plantation community in Sri Lanka was brought over, it's kind of a little less than 1 million now, was brought over as indentured labor to Sri Lanka by the British in the 19th century. In 1949, they lost their citizenship. And because under the British, all the people in Sri Lanka, had some form of citizenship. But when the British left, they did not really see to it that the people they had brought over had citizenship, and then the ethnic politics in Sri Lanka kind of did not really encompass in extent to this very marginalized community, although politically powerful but marginalized, socially marginalized working community. So I organized, so I was part of this workshop where Tamil and Sinhala people were going to come together. But before that, I just wanted to kind of see, as an educative measure for myself, I organized a one-day gathering only with the plantation workers who were Tamil speaking, so that I would know when we actually did the workshop, the longer sessions, what to look out for, and so on and so forth. This was a few months after a major riot in the region called the Bindu Nueva riots. The Bindu Nueva riots were, it took place in an area called Bindu Nueva in the hill country where the plantation workers are mostly. There was an open prison, a rehabilitation camp, where a lot of suspected Tamil militants, terrorists, what do we call them, were kept. But it was a rehabilitation camp, so there was some kind of a flexibility in terms of their mobility. It was more like, it was part detention, but some of them could go out and come. They were trying some reform measure, reformist kind of way of handling this. But anyway, something happened. There was an internal confrontation between the inmates and the management. And on that particular day, it kind of flared up or escalated. The regular manager was on leave or something like that, and they brought in the police. About 200 village people came in, and 26 political inmates died in the clash. There was no clash. Initially there was a clash between the inmates and the management, which quickly turned into a massacre, carried out by the villagers, the townspeople, in connivance with the police. So the plantation workers were not involved in it. It's not there. I think there was one inmate, one of them who was in the rehabilitation camp, who belonged to the plantation community, but the others were all from the north and east. They were all Tamil speaking, but they belonged to different communities. However, after this encounter, there was a big riot. The rioting spread out, spilled over into the area, and the youth of the community, plantation community, and the police, the Sinhala people in the area, they all clashed with one another. So my encounter, this gathering, my discussion on ethnicity was in the aftermath of Bindu Nueva. Vijay Kumar, and at this workshop I met Vijay Kumar. Vijay Kumar was quiet for the most part, but spoke of the Bindu Nueva riots. He and his friend had been putting up a poster about Bindu Nueva when the police had appeared and shot his friend, killing him. He, Vijay Kumar, had fled the scene. Shocked and disturbed, I did not say much at that time. A month later, I did the 5-day workshop with the 20 to 25 Sinhala and Tamil people and they were mostly young people. And it was a very, very fraught workshop because because they were young, the Sinhala, and that was what was kind of nice too, because they were young, they were very spontaneous, and they were like, they said, they were very hostile to me, the Sinhala youth, because they said, you don't know, you are just from Colombo, you are bringing all these problems to the community here, to Sinhalese and Tamils. They didn't talk about Muslims. I think for them they didn't exist at that time. Anyway, Sinhalese and Tamils live in amity here, and so on and so forth. They refused to participate, but we kind of got it all going somehow. And the Tamils were coming and saying, we can't do some of these things because we can't go back and live with these people. It's too scary. I know that guy's uncle who has a shop somewhere, and they are like thugs. I mean, they will burn our shop and all kinds of things. And then at one point, we in groups had to devise flags. What I do sometimes is we discuss the national flag. We have a national flag, unfortunately, in our country, and so sometimes I perform with it, I dance with it. I do this kind of thing also. We discussed it. And interestingly, for me it was interesting because I was like saying, this means the Sinhala people. Have you seen I wish I brought it actually, but it's not here. Nobody has seen the lion with the sword and all kinds of things. Yeah, it's a real funky flag, mind you. I mean, like one of my little friends went to New Zealand to study. His Tamil speaking child, and he told his teacher, and then it gave me a different perspective. Your flag is and it's the British flag, and so boring. Where are the Maoris in your flag? So, and then and we criticize the Sri Lankan flag so much. I looked back again at the Sri Lankan flag. I mean, the conflict is laid out on that flag, right? There is no not like the maple leaf, right? Huh? Anyway, these guys were telling me, you make so much. You say the sword is pointed at the Tamils. So would you like the tail to be facing the Tamils? And I said, no, we don't want. I don't want the tail to be the tail of the lion. Nor do I want the. So we ultimately, I figured, I realized that I don't want the flag at all. But then they said, you make too much of it. We don't care. I mean, when the Sri Lankan cricket team loses, we kind of we tear it up. We put it in whatever. We do all kinds of disrespectful things to it. So why do you think it means so much to us? But anyway, so we worked on that, and again, it was very, very hostile. It was fun too, in retrospect. So Vijay Kumar was there, and Vijay Kumar, and then when they said that there was nothing, that there was no problem in that area, because we were having the workshop right where all the people lived, and Norelia, that's where the community was from. That there was no ethnic conflict. Vijay Kumar was silent. He was like 18, 19. He was very silent. But he was also in the company for most of the time with one of the very articulate Sinhala youth. So I found it quite annoying and difficult, psychologically disturbing, in fact, that he was together with this guy, who I thought was a singular chauvinist. He was a young guy too. I mean, it's not like, but I mean, for me, I was like, I was trying to get Vijay Kumar to, speak out, but he wouldn't say anything. He didn't say anything about Bindanueva. This person who was putting up posters and whose friend he claims the police had shot at and killed. Then we do all kinds of other silly stuff like theater, image, and we do like a very we do some, like warm-up exercises too. And so there's an exercise where somebody has to do an action, and then the rest of the group has to imitate that, I mean, they have to join. And then when it came to Vijay Kumar's turn, he did something, and I didn't know. I was really puzzled. And I was like, how am I going to mimic that? And being the facilitator, the leader, or whatever it is, I have my reputation also too, so I can't fail, One of my assistants, a young Tamil man, a fellow theatre person, saw my discomfiture and, remarking on it, said that it was a signature action of the superstar Rajinikanth, where he flips the cigarette and lights it with his pistol while the cigarette is still mid-air. I was awestruck not only by this impersonation of Rajinikanth, so well executed by Vijay Kumar, but also by what the impersonation of this Robin Hood-like hero's violence meant to this young man who had put up flags or posters during the Bindanueva riots, seen his friend get shot and killed by the police, and then at the workshop denied any allegation of ethnic disharmony between Sinhalese and Tamils. Rajinikanth is known for the violence in his films, most of which are achieved through obvious tricks of technology, but executed with a heightened dramatization of the male body. I have lost touch with Vijay Kumar, though I run into his friend, the guy who was arguing with me. And his name is Sampath. A few weeks later, Sampath. So we get back. Of course, I'm not worried at all. But the people who I was with, they were all very upset because they think there had been all this quarreling in the workshop and we have not resolved, we have not reached ethnic amity, and I was like, it doesn't matter. I don't care because I was confident that I had done something with them invoking silence, and for me that silence was important. But anyway, I was pleased nevertheless when Sampath, the guy who was arguing with me, he wrote a letter to the director of the organization saying what a wonderful, it had been such an eye-opener, the workshop and these sessions. I, of course, don't know anything about Vijay Kumar. I don't know where he is, what he's doing. Anyway, this, for me, why I'm relating the story today is, of course, I have a long, really long paper that the editor, where I'm kind of publishing, wanted me to cut drastically, which was really long, and I said, no, I don't want to cut anything. But anyway, here I want to talk about this because I wanted to figure out two not to understand, but to engage in a real, interesting, fulfilling dialogue. Do I need to know something about Rajinikanth? I'm putting it very baldly. It's not like I need to know. I mean, the pleasures of watching this male, the performance of the male body and its conquest of all evil in the silver screen, you know. I mean, I would now and then, because that's all that's there on TV, and so so now and then I would watch Tamil film, but not regularly. But after my long interaction, after this, I was working with the people, the same group, on a media, on interactive media and identity, questions of identity. And I actually came to enjoy watching Tamil film. And for me, transformational practice is about translating also oneself into a humility. If so many people are watching and deriving pleasure, they can't be all wrong, right? I mean, for me, I mean, there's the academics kind of superiority about, I know better, I can go and do research on why people like Tamil film, right? But still I know better, right? Now maybe, and they are not watching Rajnikant, I am right, because they moved on, right? I'm kind of stuck. So, and then for me that paper was, or that research encounter was very important, because in terms of method, I started examining so many things, even in terms of voice. I'm like in performance, we do that all the time, but in research, there's the academic's voice, right? The person who writes the paper. Then the editor said, "Can't you use quotation marks for the other voice?" I said, "No, I can't." And then so how? Then she said, "It's confusing how the voices." I said, "Yeah, sometimes I am confused myself when I read. Sometimes I can't distinguish between my voice and the people's, because it kind of weaves in and out." And for me, that became very, very important. But we are different people. I am not a plantation worker. To say that would be wrong. So, I mean, how do we keep all of this? In that encounter, we discussed various things, and we discussed different figures of masculinity. And I think I need to stop now. And one figure of masculinity we discussed was Gandhi. And this was before I read Ashish Nandi on Gandhi, but I want to send my paper to him. And about Utthaman and the ascetic, and all that kind of what he inhabits in the Indian in the plantation workers, who cannot afford to not eat. They cannot afford to fast. But Gandhi is this figure of adulation, or Uttaman, of nobility, whatever it is, yeah. So, in my also encounter, in my research, whatever we did, they also were asking me about, you don't look Tamil, you don't wear the, whatever that's called, I don't wear the sari. My Tamil is not their Tamil, so all these markers of difference. And then once we were eating somewhere, and So that's where this discussion with some of the participants, we were eating in a eating house for lower middle class, working class people. It's a Muslim eating place, and I was eating beef. And so somebody asked, "Do you?" I offered this guy, other people, and they didn't take. But somebody said, or somebody took, I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So later on, we were going around, and there are all these statues for MG Ramachandran, all that in the estate area, little statues that people had made. And I saw a statue far away, and we had got lost, so we were trying to find how to go. It was all very hilly, this area. And I saw a statue that faintly resembled Gandhi, but was like a bit well fed. And I said, "Oh, that's a beef eating Gandhi." And there was a look of shock and outrage. But I have power, so they can't do anything to me. I'll stop there because I really want to show this David film, but it's 18 minutes. Are you up to watching it? It has nothing to do with anything I've spoken about. But since I brought it all the way from Sri Lanka. Let me tell you, it's about, I'll maybe give you some context. It's about a middle class. It's about a middle class Tamil woman living in Colombo in the backdrop of war. Right. Shall we have have the lights down. So we cut our chicken in small pieces, chunky but small, like how we cut vendika.
What is vendika?
Vendika? Vendika. That's how we cut the chicken in small pieces.
Small pieces? Why so small? I like to have big pieces. So I feel that I'm eating chicken.
It's only then that all the juices and the spices get into the chicken. That's how my mother used to cook.
In my culture, we don't slice the chicken. They are in big pieces. Damn. You know that you are eating chicken there.
Why start on your culture when I'm talking about my mother?
In my home,
ඉතාස් 983 කලතුරු හිට වසර 25ක් පිරීම හේතු කොටගෙන ප්‍රචණ්ඩ ක්‍රියා වැළැක්වීමේ උපක්‍රමයක් ලෙසට කොළඹ නගරයේ ආරක්ෂාව තරකොට ඇත. එම ප්‍රචණ්ඩකාරී ක්‍රියාවන් සිහිපත් කරමින් සහ හෙලා දකිමින් රජයේ මාධ්‍ය ප්‍රකාශකවරයා කියා සිටියේ මේ වන විට සාම සාකච්ඡා ඇනහිට තිබුණද ජනවාරි 18 රජයේ කැපවී සිටින බවයි. මේ සඳහා සාකච්ඡාවේ සිට පැමිණීමට ඊටදී සම්පූර්ණයට තාමත් විවෘත වී තිබෙන බවයි.
சௌந்தர்யா ஓ நீங்களா எப்படி நான் நல்லா இருக்கிறேன் கொழுப்புல இருக்கிறீங்க ஓ நாங்க 95லயே வந்துட்டோம் ஜெஃப்னால இருந்து கொழும்புல வேலை செய்றீங்களா இப்ப இல்ல நான் பெரதேனியா யூனிவர்சிட்டி அங்க லெக்சர் பண்றேன் நீங்க நான் வீட்டுல தான் அப்ப உங்களோட டான்சிங் எல்லாம் அதெல்லாம் விட்டுட்டேன் டான்ஸ் கிளாஸ் அதொன்றும் இல்ல இப்ப எல்லாம் விட்டுட்டேன் வீட்டுத்தான் உங்களோட ஃபேமிலி அவங்க What's that? சரியான கஷ்டமா தான் இருந்தது நாங்க அங்க இருக்கேக்க ஒரே பாம்பிங் ஷெல்லிங் பாம்பர் வேற பங்கருக்குள்ள ஓடுறது சில வேளையில மணித்தேர கணக்கா இருக்கணும் அது முடியும் வேற அவங்க போக மாட்டோம் பிறகு வெளியால வேற வெளிக்கிடுவோம்னு யோசிச்சாலும் பாஸ் எடுக்கிற சரியான கஷ்டம் உங்களுக்கு தெரிஞ்சிருக்கும் பாஸ் எடுக்கணும் அங்க பெர்மிஷன் எடுக்கணும் சரியா அலைஞ்சு திரிஞ்சு நாங்க பிறகு ஷிப்ல வந்து தான் ட்ரிங்கோக்கு வந்து கொழும்புக்கு வந்தனாங்க உங்களுக்கு தெரியும் தானே கொழும்புக்கு வந்து பெருசா நிம்மதியேண்டு இல்ல ஒரே செக்கிங்கும் திடீரென்று ஒரு பாம்பு வெடிக்கும் அப்ப எல்லாருக்கும் ஒரு பயம் எல்லாருக்கும் எந்த ஒரு செட்டில்டு இல்லாத ஒரு ஃபீலிங் தான்
வரை தாங்கள் தொடர்ந்து சண்டை புரிவார்கள் என்று தெரிவித்துள்ளார்கள். அரசாங்கம் தமிழ் மக்களை பேய்காட்டி போலித்தனமாக நடக்கிறது என்று அந்த செய்தியில் மேலும் தெரிவிக்கப்பட்டுள்ளது. சமாதான பேச்சுவார்த்தை ஏற்பட்டு காரணம் அதிகார பகிர்வு பற்றிய சிக்கலே என அரசியல் அறிஞர் டாக்டர் பி பத்மநாதன் தெரிவித்திருக்கிறார். வடக்கு பிரதேசத்தையொட்டி ராணுவத்திற்கும் படைகளுக்கும் இடையில் வன்னிக்காடுகளிலும் யாழ்குடா நாட்டிலும் பலத்த யுத்தம் நடைபெற்றுக் கொண்டிருக்கிறது. இரு தரப்புக்கும் பலத்த சேதம் ஏற்பட்டிருப்பதாக சுதந்திர ஊடக வட்டாரங்கள் தெரிவிக்கின்றன. ஆயிரக்கணக்கான மக்கள் தங்களது இருப்பிடங்களை விட்டு வெளியேறி காடுகளுக்கூடாகவும் ஆறுகள் கடல் வழியாகவும் தப்பியோடுகிறார்கள். அவர்கள் தற்போது பள்ளிக்கூடங்களிலும் கோயில் பள்ளிவாசல் ஆலயங்களிலும் மற்றும் பொதுவான இடங்களிலும் தஞ்சம் கொண்டுள்ளனர். ஆஸ்பத்திரிகள் காயப்பட்டவர்களின் எண்ணிக்கையால் நிரம்பி வழிகின்றன. காயப்பட்டவர்களில் எல்லா இனங்களையும் சார்ந்தவர்கள் என்பது குறிப்பிடத்தக்கது. யுத்தத்தின் கோரத்தில் பிள்ளைகள் பெண்கள் வலது குறைந்தவர்கள் வயதினர் என்று பல்லாயிரம் பேர் அகப்பட்டிருக்கின்றனர். யுத்தத்தை உடனடியாக நிறுத்துமாறு
ඔයා කවුද?
කඩල ඕනද?
Do you want some tea?
No, thank you.
You'd like to have an orange then?
Sumathy take some questions? Sumathy, will you take some questions? Yeah.
Are there any questions for Sumathy? I think there's a microphone floating around the audience. Lee?
Well, it's tempting to ask you to relate the two parts of this presentation, but I don't think I'd understand the answer because I don't understand a whole lot of the film yet. I think, just to relate to your translation theme,
Yeah.
I think some of the things which any Sri Lankan, whether Sinhala or Tamil, would have seen and noticed and recognized to identify characters, I didn't. I've never been there, and that's not part of my focus of my studies. So I wonder if you could just, either you or somebody, just tell us a little bit about, I don't know how to identify the different characters, either, you know, ethnically or in terms of their relationship. I'm not sure what the cues were that, that your normal audience would have seen. So that would just help me. I mean, I did understand the relationship between everyday life and the situations you were suggesting, and it was very powerful images, both the peeling of the orange at the beginning and the windshield wipers at the end, that, you know, that framed this other context. But just in terms of personal relations, if someone could help me out, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. I could, unless of course somebody has a different insight. In trying to relate, you know, I mean, films. I did this. I did Oranges because one thing, middle class people are not treated as subjects in terms of the conflict. It's always about someone else. But the people who do the research are middle class, right? So there is this, like, you have to go and study someone else. So I want to do a middle class woman who is also like me. Anyway, no, she's not like me. I hope not. But the guy is Sinhala. Did you get that?
I assume
Right, and in the language, it kind in the about the chicken and all that. Yeah, it comes through if you know the. So a singular person would know what it is, and others as well. The younger woman, she's come from like Jaffna, yeah, from so has a different experience of war. Um, so I mean, those are the other characters are not so. Well, there's a suicide bomber in there. Did you get that? The poster is a poster of a suicide bomber. Did you catch that, Yalini or Sugi? You
I mean, I knew that she was a rebel, or like LTT. I didn't know that she was specific.
well, it need not be. Yeah, it need not be. But yeah, because she is wanted, and then um, that's the kind of information that you ask for usually. So anybody seeing that poster would know that it's about her, because they are not even looking for her. It's information about that person. So that's kind of a standard suicide, like a poster about, do you know this person, or do you have any information about this person? So those are the things, but it need not be a suicide. I mean, it's some another person who belong to the LTT or whatever. So those are the like character-wise the uh, for me, it is about the everyday. So, if the research is also about the everyday at one level, then the our films, our performances, our other activist ventures are also trying to get at the interstices of rhetoric, political statements, and so on and so forth. So I mean, that's how I would try to. This is very. It's unlike my other two. The one I'm now, the film that I'm doing now or done now, the feature film, is about the plantation workers. It's very different from this. So this is. Yeah, this is a very heavily script. So in a way, unlike a lot of what I normally do. So, but still, I mean, that's why I find it interesting, because there are many ways of getting to kind of the same thing you want.
No, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do have a follow-up question, if I could. So I noticed that in the credits we saw that this was, I guess, partly funded by sort of the film board, Sri Lankan film board, but I saw in there a reconciliation board as well. Did I read that correctly towards the end of the film in the credits?
It was part of the government film units. No, there was no. They had an short film and experimental project. They advertised and they applied, and Flicked. Yeah, Flicked is it's a German fund of reconciliation. But was that there in the credit? I mean, did you say reconciliation?
It did, right? Did somebody else see that? Right, something?
It said somewhere. Maybe under Flicked or what? Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So
No, I mean, I guess the question is, it's not entirely relevant whether it was funded by that or not. It's a question, I guess, you made reference in your talk to, the workshops that you run in an attempt to facilitate reconciliation. And I think that is something I unfortunately, my knowledge of the Sri Lankan conflict runs shallow, but my engagement with the notion of ethnic conflict runs very deep. And I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your work, whether it's through film or through theater or in the classroom, about reconciliation and how you see your own work in facilitating that process, or even talk to us about what that process means in a context like Sri Lanka and your experience of it.
Yeah, in in working on reconciliation, reconciliation has become a dirty word in Sri Lanka now because it's either done by the government or by the NGO sector. So both are tainted. In the sense, it's either about one vision of what the country is, or that's the government side of it, or it is about how much money can my workshop have. So it's either way, it has its problems, right? So reconciliation for me, has to come with looking at material relations of power. And I am at this point trying to push reconciliation, if you want to use the word reconciliation at all, reconciliation in the direction of a non-ethnic or a post-ethnic. For want of a better word, I'm using this. I mean, I don't think we can actually talk of a non-ethnic, post-ethnic situation, but examine issues where we are not stuck in we're not stuck in ethnic, an identification.
So what would those, I mean, if I can follow, what would those identities be? I mean, I found it interesting that...
Class, maybe, class. Recently, a friend of mine, he wrote a paper, and actually I told him that it would be very good to do that. The poetry, the story of the Tamil poem, and I collaborated with him, a Muslim perspective. And I encouraged him to because he asked me, is that okay, and all that. And I said, yes, very good, I mean, all this stuff. But now I told him, do you want to revisit that? Which I thought, in a way a bit unfair, because the Tamil poem, the Tamil literature had been heavily nationalistic, Tamil nationalist. And suddenly, and then there are Muslims now overtly talking about a Muslim perspective, and I'm saying the time's gone. So it is a bit unfair, but I do want the Muslim people, because I work a lot with the Muslims. I don't want them and us, if I am a part of them in some way politically, to get into the kind of idiocy that the Tamils had been for so long, make the same mistakes through a reactive process. And as a community that where its not its political leaders but cultural leaders like writers, the Muslims had been very very generous and very what can I say? So I mean, I think they can. These cultural actors can actually navigate a lot of identities at the same time. But these are things that one could say or experiment with in a smaller group, and discuss where it could take us to. Does that make sense? He and I are involved in a project. It was so long because I'm also doing other things, where Tamil people write about Muslims and Muslims write about Tamils. And this is about three-wheeler drivers. These are very ordinary people. These are they're writing about midwives, three-wheeler drivers who work. So there is also also about social history. You're not just writing about, I am Tamil, he's Muslim. I mean, it's not like that. It's about mapping a history of social relations. It's social history, but looking at, into the Tamil midwife talking about working in Muslim homes delivering, staying there, and the three-wheeler, Muslim three-wheeler drivers talking about how they operated during the conflict when the LTTs told Tamil people not to use Muslim three-wheeler drivers. So it's like their story back. Then there's this much older peasant woman who actually, she's a Muslim person, who actually did something in the Kali Koil for small chicken pox. She, he she had a like a ritual something she did, and it's her grandson who's writing that story about her working in operating in that space, which he told me it's not available now, that particular kind of function where a Muslim woman could actually function as a healer in a Hindu coil is not available now. So, and then, so these are, and while we spoke also, there was this woman, they had to actually go and interview three-wheeler drivers, and this woman said, oh, I would not get into a Muslim three-wheeler. And then, so we talked, so she's now she has to go and interview the people. So then that whole, so that, for me, that is reconciliation, that they confront their own problems, but through materiality also. It's the fear. What is the fear? And it's about territory, labor, all of that has to come into that. It's not about playing football. It could be, but it's not about singing songs of peace or, because that's, yeah. The answers, yeah.
Sumathy, I was interested in what you were saying about the film being about ordinary life and going back to what Lee had said, asking about sort of some of the historical cues. So I'm curious as to whether I got them or whether I was reading them correctly. So the woman who comes from Jaffna has been there since 1995, which was when the Tigers had all of Jaffna evacuated.
Yeah.
So that was a period of time when there was a mass, what some people refer to as the exodus from Jaffna. So a massive number of people leaving and sort of a stream of displacement. So she would have come from that, and her experience would have been very different than the other woman's.
Yeah, who lives in Colombo, yeah.
Right, and then there's also the reference to 1990 when the LTT evicted Muslims from Jaffna. So that reference was there as well. So this is all ordinary life, and the present action of the movie seems to take place over a very short period of time. But there's an enormous...
Well, the eviction, the reference to Muslims is not necessarily to the eviction, because the LTT's actions vis-a-vis the Muslims throughout.
Right, but I think there's a specific mention of 1990 in the footage.
I'm not sure.
I don't mean to imply that it was exclusive, that it didn't mention other things, but I think it specifically mentioned 1990.
Did it?
I think so.
I'll go back.
So the present action of the movie goes over a short period of time, but there's all these references to other periods of time, and there's sort of the presence of the past in the present, and then there's the photo album, and I heard, I think, unless I was greatly mistaken, a couple of sort of murmurs of recognition. My family perhaps also has these tiny photographs pasted into an album, and we perhaps also mutter over them to each other. And so that imagery being very different from all of the time periods are marked in different ways visually. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, because it's about ordinary life, but you managed to cram a lot of other references in there. And so, Lee, I also wanted to kind of mention some of those just so you got context, and also to see if I actually got it right. see if my homework is paid off.
Yeah. You know, that final footage, that's really old. The Avro plane bomb, that's like from one of the first LTT attacks. For me, let me put it this way. For me, the war in that way is not, time stood still. I mean, it's unimaginable how you could use a mid 70s footage as part of the contemporary moment. In 2006 about war, and it works. I mean, I knew it was from 1970s because of the Avro plane. No one else knew. I would say that I did not go for any particular historical period. It was conjuring up the presence of war, which covers a long period, but also there's no chronology to it. It could any of these things could have happened then and there too, at that time, because does it? So I mean, it is that immediacy. For a lot of young people, these things don't mean anything. I mean, they all could have taken place the day before for them, and then they forget also. So I wasn't looking for. That's why maybe I mentioned 1990. I'm a little puzzled. But even if
I think it's the news voiceover. It's the news voiceover.
Yeah.
And there is a reference to 83 as well. So.
Yeah, 83, but as an anniversary.
Right.
because that happens. 83 is annually evoked for us during the war as the tightening of security in Colombo. So security is tightened and there's more checking. So everybody, all Sri Lankans, I mean, like Sinhala people or Tamil Muslims living in the south, even if they had no idea of the history of, many of them don't know anything about the history of that thing, but they know about 83 because it's July, Black July, then they wait for the speeches, then the president will have a statement, opposition will have all of them. So it's relived, and so the war is kind of reenacted in interesting ways, and I think for me, in that character's mind, it comes up. It's a kind of about the imaginary also. So the actual historical events don't matter too much. One is the Torrington. This is done in film, celluloid. So I had to find film material as footage, which is very difficult to get now because nobody takes a film camera to the location of a bomb blast. But some of these, I could find these three. So, these three segments in film. I mean, I could have done a video transfer, but it would have cost me much more to transfer from video to film. Whereas the process was easier. So, I mean, my other films I'm doing the transfer, but yeah. So a filmmaker, actually, this German documentary, he said, why did I reconstruct the bomb blast? I should have left it as a document, I should have had this documentary footage there. But I thought, like, for me, doing reconstructing it as a kind of a, in a filmic sense, was like a kind of counterpoint to all the uh, footage. So kind of people have interesting questions, queries. Yeah.
One little observation. Don't know whether it matters whether you're aware of this or not. When the two, the husband and wife,
Yeah.
were talking, and the difference in the chicken preparations, you paired his starting to talk about his culture with her, the Tamil woman, talking about her mother. And I think that relates to what you were saying with the William Blake poem about the larger salience and deep feeling. So in some sense, the Tamil doesn't have to, rephrase or abstract, talk about something, in the cultural terms. There's this much more. I think it's part of something that you just know tacitly, but to evoke a larger sense of any kind of, identity, history, tradition, culture. I'm using all these words. All you have to do is talk about Amma, and all of these other things are there, and they're in a very, very implicit and powerful way.
Yeah.
And I don't, and you wrote that script, so I don't know whether it matters
But
whether how intentional it was, but that was, it's just
she retaliates. She retaliates. She says, "Why do you talk about your culture when I'm talking about my mother?" Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the two different ways of phrasing that.
Yeah, for me it's interesting because a lot of people think it is about the way you cook chicken, and I say no, it's not about the way you cook chicken. It's about they don't seem to like each other. Oh, maybe they like each other too much. We don't know. There's a problem between them, not about the chicken. In yeah, she retaliates, and it's interesting because I really to finish the film. I really needed some completion funds, and that's when CEDA came in. So I had actually completed the first before processing the first the editing copy, and then they came to watch it. So I could not just show a script and say it's going to be a wonderful film. It's already there, So they don't like it. They can't. They don't give the funds. So after watching it, then she asked, "So what is it? What is the last bit?" And they say, "Oh, life goes on," and there's a dialogue. I was like, because he leaves and she's there. "Oh, you mean to say it's open-ended?" And I said, yes, it's open-ended. So that's how I kind of. So I think people are also kind of grappling with all this. Yeah.
Conversation is also how they are trying to claim their cultural space, and so
Yeah.
what is their identity, and
Yeah.
it's very subtle, and it's also very short space. They do everything. It's quite informative. Whenever people are from different identities, they try to live together. They talk about this, try to claim, which is there's a really an authenticity question, which is the larger political question too.
Yeah, I know.
So how did the actors react to this scene when you tried to explain to them when they were trying to do it? Because they are also playing certain ethnic roles too. They are also coming from different background too.
You mean well, the woman. She said it's her, although she is her partner, at least at that time, was Tamil. But then she said, "This is my life. This is about me." I don't know why she said that when she read the script. And so it's not only about ethnicity then. The main woman, so.
I think at least in Tamil Nadu, the context when husband and wife they are from the same caste, but they get married. If she comes from a different region, husband always says, my mother cooks like this."
Right.
So there is an interesting context all the time.
Yeah.
Reclaiming what the space is, what is authentic, and whose space is this. So I think that in a way she can relate to that from a different. She comes from a different part of Japan or Colombo and how.
Yeah,
It's a
true.
very interesting universal theme that is
Yeah.
played out nicely.
Yeah. And Saumi is a professional actor, so I mean, but he asked about it. I mean, recently he asked about it. What happened to it? The guy. Um, I mean, this is not just about actors. Well, when we were shooting the last scene, with the car tea and all, I heard the crew discussing what does oranges mean and all that. And I listened very hard because I thought, I don't know. Right? And they were really grappling with it. And I thought that's interesting because they really want to get a handle on it. So then they said oranges is like going between these two. Then somebody says orange, then it's not belonging to our culture. It's kind of, so all that. There's a kind of artificiality about their middle class lives. So, that interaction was kind of interesting too.
This is kind of open-ended too. So, you talked at the beginning about self-reflexivity.
Yeah.
In terms of anthropology. I'm an anthropologist, so
Right.
I was glad to hear that. Can you talk a little bit about what the process of research does to the researcher's politics as well? Is it also transformative? In other words, instead of coming to the research subject with a particular understanding of the politics, was your politics also transformed or changed in this process?
Yeah, because I do not come from a traditional research background. I'm from the English department. So I am used to gossiping about imaginary people and being comfortable with it. It's my art. I don't. Yeah, it's the performance, my theater background, that actually pushed me in the direction of research. So when you do performance with people, then you have to make these people real, right? I mean, they can't be, and actors inhabit, but they also take control of their characters. You can't control them. So, and the director also adapts to the space, the audience, and all that. So that's the kind of a starting point. But also, I mean, maybe because it's kind of practicing in Sri Lanka or as a Sri Lankan globally, I am very alert to the fact that all these things are very, very contingent. Once I gave a paper on Tamil women. I was speaking at a forum like this in Melbourne, University of Melbourne, on Tamil women. My paper was deeply, fundamentally critical of the LTT. It had one objective. I had one objective in this paper, to criticize the LTT. And then I go in, there are about 50 people in the audience, and at the end of the paper, I couldn't believe my ears when they all said, "You have been sent by the LTT. You are an LTT." Separatist, Sumathy and all that. And then they put up posters later saying to boycott all the people, because I went away, but to boycott the people who organized their events or whatever they were doing, who organized my event because of whatever. So, I mean, for me, I realized very early on in my as an academic, there's no safe space that people think about. The academic space is safe, and so that means our research itself, our research projects, or our interaction encounters themselves could not be safe spaces. They have to be transformative of myself. So, who the researcher is also. So I'm right now. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you aesthetically, formalistically, if you look at what I write, My research papers are like films, and my films are like research papers. I don't know. I mean, like there's a kind of a formalist a blur in the sense of in when it comes to form. In terms of content, the last two papers I don't publish unless of course I write about myself, and as a performer, as an artist, they allow you to write about her, they don't they so I occupy that privileged space. But last two research papers I wrote about were one paper which many to publish in social identities was written solely by the women. I have only an afterword. So for me, and it carried all their names. For me, that the women, the 14 women, including me, who were involved in that project, they're all authors, but they're not authors because I want them to be authors, because it's their words, it's their writing, they wrote. They actually wrote. It's not like I recorded their voices and then wrote it and said they were authors. They actually wrote about the government, the LTT, the schools, hospitals, and all that. And so what I did was I structured it in a particular way. And it's called Salt, Sand, and Water. And it's written by 14 people. We also did identity cards modeled on, so along with the writing, we have pictures where we recreated identities for ourselves in various different ways, modeled on the national identity card. But the women went far, they did many different things. So it's transformative in another sense. The research is informing how all of this. Yeah. So, and then at the moment, a few of us, and I are working on sexual violence in a time in a conflict, and we have not begun that. But what we are forced to encounter, or confront, or kind of grapple with, is this idea of sexual violence that's kind of already given to us in terms of rape, court cases, witnessing, and there's something very problematic about it. So I'm waiting to see at this moment how that would be transformed, those paradigms. Yeah.